I purchased HP tuners back in 2012 and have been tuning my cars and a few others ever since. You're here because you're wondering if you should plunk down the cash for HP tuners and start tuning your cars. The truth is, you are the only one who can answer that question, but I can help by asking you a few targeted questions to decide if HP tuners is right for you. And I say it that way because what's right for me or anybody else may or may not be right for you.
Toys for life.
Here's what qualifies me to help you to decide. For a few years before I purchased HP tuners, I struggled with questions like, will it be worth it? Will I blow up my engine? Will I wreck my computer? Am I smart enough to learn how to tune? So after a few years of pondering these questions and dragging my feet, I realized that I'm a car guy, I'll always be a car guy, and the sooner I learn how to tune, it'll benefit me for years and years to come. So I plunked down the cash and made the purchase. Looking back, it was absolutely a key decision for me to really start getting into modifying fuel-injected engines. Prior to that, over the couple of decades, I've modified plenty of engines, but they all had carburetors. And the reason I say HP tuners is key is because anytime you make any sort of a material modification to a fuel-injected engine, it really requires modifying the tune to get the most out of your new hardware. Finding a good tuner that you trust, making the appointment, and paying the fee every time you need a tune done is quite a hassle, and over time it gets to be extremely expensive. So the main motivations for me to learn how to tune my own cars was A, not to have to search for a qualified tuner, B, to not have to make an appointment, which for a good tuner might be a week or two out, C, to not have to pay every single time I needed a tune, and D, to be able to tune anytime I wanted, maybe in the evenings or on a Saturday or whatever, whenever I had spare time. And looking back for my situation, it has been absolutely worth it. So now let's switch to you and see if we can figure out if purchasing HP tuners or a similar program and learning to tune is the right decision for you. Each one of us comes from different backgrounds with different levels of automotive experience and tuning knowledge. So to make sure we're all on the same page, let's define what we mean by tuning your engine. All engines, even Ford engines, are essentially just air pumps. The engine block, the heads, the pistons, all of that work together to pump air in and out of the engine, along with a few explosions here and there. Our engines have 4 strokes, and this is the piston up here and the rod. This is the engine block. Intake, compression, and just a little bit before top dead center, spark. Then you have the power stroke, and then you have the exhaust stroke. And once that happens, it just keeps repeating the same process over and over. When tuning a fuel-injected engine, in very generic, high-level terms, we are basically doing 3 things. First, we have to make sure that the car's fuel injection system is accurately measuring or calculating the amount of air that's coming into the engine. We do this by hooking up HP Tuner scanner and a wideband oxygen sensor, hopefully, to our engine. Then we go for a test drive and we scan the run and record it on the laptop so we can review it later. After the test drive is done, we sit down with the laptop and review the scan to determine if there's any errors and if corrections need to be made to the tune so that the car is measuring or calculating the correct amount of air. Then we modify the tune, upload it, if you will, back to the car's computer, and then we repeat the test drive again, scanning for data as many times as it takes until we're confident that the car's fuel injection system is giving the correct information back to the car's computer as to how much air is coming into the engine. Once we're confident that the car's computer system has an accurate idea of how much air is coming in, we can select air to fuel ratios for everything just past part throttle all the way to wide open throttle that we believe will give the engine the most power. Once again, we will manipulate the data using the laptop in the tune, and then we will upload the new tune to the car's computer. This is the tricky part because there is no one perfect air-fuel ratio that will yield the most power for any engine combination. Even engines that are almost identical can have slightly different air-fuel ratios for optimal power. The good news is that by using information shared on online tuning communities by some of the advanced members, you typically can find ratios and information that will get you close for what your combination includes. We always start with relatively safe ratios to keep things from blowing up, but if you want to get closer, we can use a dyno or go to a quarter-mile track, and by looking at the horsepower and torque curves on the dyno sheet or your mile per hour in the quarter mile, you can determine if you're adding more horsepower or not. Our LS engines also have a very important and beneficial sensor known as a knock sensor that warn us if we're starting to get dangerous knock, so we can stop what we're doing and reevaluate our air-fuel ratio. Once we get our air-fuel ratio sorted out, we can move on to ignition timing, which is the point in time on the compression stroke, generally before top dead center, that the computer tells the spark plug to fire. When tuning the ignition or spark timing on a fuel-injected engine, we have a crazy amount of control over exactly when that spark plug fires over any condition.
Fire! Fire!
Ignition timing is a fascinating part of the tuning process, and once again, even engines that are very similar can have somewhat different needs with regards to when the spark plug fires. Using different fuels like E85 versus pump gas drastically affect the amount of ignition timing. Adding forced induction to an engine will drastically affect your ignition timing. And even throughout the RPM, high RPMs versus low RPMs affect your timing, and the load that's on the engine at any particular RPM combination will also affect your ignition timing. Once again, we can get the ignition timing curves pretty close based on books, common knowledge, and tuning forums, but again, to get things really dialed in, you'd want to use an engine dyno or go to a quarter-mile track. To make sure that you're increasing your horsepower without any damaging knock, which can destroy your motor. And once again, those knock sensors come in handy when you're timing your spark. So in a nutshell, from a 30,000 foot view, that is what I mean by tuning your engine. HP Tuners does also allow you to do so many other different things, like for example, changing when your fans come on for your radiator, changing your transmission shift points if you change rear end gears, changing things if you change tire sizes, and all kinds of other different things, and diagnostics. And there's a whole lot of additional benefits that we really don't have the time to go into for the purpose of this video. So admittedly, that was a pretty long-winded definition of the tuning process, but now we're all on the same page. And if most of that was new to you, and this is where you really need to be honest with yourself, then I'm going to encourage you to put the purchasing of HP tuners on hold temporarily. Instead, I would encourage you to study up to gain a better understanding of how the internal combustion engine works, how fuel injection systems work, and what the components of each are. I would go far enough to the point where you can name the individual components of each, and generally speaking, what each component does. Doing this will greatly enhance your ability to learn the tuning process, I promise you that. If, however, this seems like more work than your interest and curiosity will allow you to accomplish, and that's okay because we all have tons of priorities begging for our time, then most likely your best bet is to find a reputable tuner in your local area to tune your vehicles. If, however, you understood most of what I was talking about when I described the general definition of engine operation and fuel injection tuning, then let's dig a little bit deeper into what the other costs would be, and generally the next steps would be to actually get started tuning, and we'll go ahead and do that in part 2. Also for part 2, if you've got a question, comment, or concern, please leave it in the comments below. If it's relevant to a typical car guy or girl who's thinking about getting into tuning, I'll be sure to include it in part 2. Guys, I appreciate your making it this far in the video. Please hit the thumbs up below. Consider subscribing. And as always, thanks for watching.